Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. Wow, it's been a wild couple of days, don't you think? But I want to start out by reminding viewers, and this is not the Eternal Life Plan family, because I know you're not like this. These are the viewers that will jump on and try to, you know, tear up the chat. If you disrespect Pope Leo in any way, we don't tolerate that on this channel. We respect the Pope. We respect him and we treat him with respect. So if you do not in the comments, you will be banned permanently from being able to comment again on the Eternal Life Plan channel. So I just want to make that clear because I know this is a hot topic for a lot of people. And we have Mike Lewis here to really get into what has happened over the next couple of days, who's excommunicated, and who has a chance to be redeemed. Well, we're going to have Mike explain all of that to us. As you see on the ticker, it's where Peter is. And some of the articles that we will be talking about tonight are in the description area below this video. After the live stream is over, you'll be able to click on those links to get to where Peter is, and the articles will be referencing during this live stream. So let's bring Mike in and let's get right into it.
Hi,
hey,
Christine.
Mike, thank you.
Thank you for having me. So it's been a big week in church news.
Yeah. Yes, where do we start, Mike?
Well, I mean, I guess picking up from where we left off, we've had a number of shows, most recently with Dan Kavik about this situation with the Society of St. Pius X. Back in February 2nd, I think they announced that they were going to consecrate 4 new bishops. Their names became public at the beginning of June, and they went through with it yesterday. They did it without the Pope's permission, and along the way, the DDF, through Cardinal Fernandez, as the Pope's delegate, basically, he's in charge of keeping track of people who are, that's the department historically that has been in charge of disciplining over doctrinal matters and matters of schism. It's the same office that excommunicated or announced the excommunication of Archbishop Vigano back in 2024. And
let me stop you right there. Okay. There is this trend going around, I've noticed, Mike, on X today and some of the comments on my channel. And that is, why did the Pope excommunicate the SSPX? Why did the Pope excommunicate Vigano? They excommunicated themselves.
Yes. The term that is used is latae sententiae. It basically, that's a Latin term, but basically it means that they've sentenced themselves to excommunication. In addition, they were warned this is going to result in latae sententiae excommunication. I mean, you have experts in canon law that would probably be able to explain this a little bit, in more depth with the right numbers. But it actually says in canon law, I think the number is 1387, but don't hold me to that, that consecrating a bishop without a pontifical mandate results in an automatic excommunication. They have the SSPX, as they always do, argues that they have something called supplied jurisdiction due to a crisis in the church. It's basically the legal fiction that they've invented. It's an interesting thing. If the church says something that benefits them, for example, Pope Francis gave them faculties to validly hear confessions and absolve sins. Before that, according to the theology and the doctrine of the Catholic Church, all of those absolutions, all of those people who went to confession with the SSPX those confessions were not just considered illicit, which means that they weren't done with permission. They were considered invalid, because unless you have permission to hear confessions from your proper superior, whether it's your local bishop or the Pope, you can't validly confect that sacrament except in the danger of death. So because they're validly but illicitly ordained priests, hopefully when these priests went and visited people on their deathbed, at least as a grace supplied by the church, those confessions were seen as valid. But if you went, if you went on a regular Saturday afternoon or Sunday morning, whenever their confessions were available, I mean, it was almost sacramentally could be seen as the grace wasn't being confected. And that's one of the things that happened yesterday. I don't know if we want to go through the actual teaching itself, but yes, the thing is,
Well,
but to go back to the excommunication, it's a formal decree, and they were excommunicated by participating in the schismatic act itself. So, and that's
Mike, I'll be honest with you. Okay. Now, you know me. The viewers know me. I am so glad this is over.
Yeah.
I mean, I really, really am glad it's over. I'm sad for the people that have been the parishioners and the laity involved in the SSPX. I'm sad for them, but the hierarchy of the SSPX knew exactly what they were doing.
Yes.
I do not cut them any slack at all.
I would agree with you with one caveat, which is, if you look at the biographies of Father Pagliarani, who's their superior general, and of the 4 new bishops, I believe if you look at their biographies, now granted the biographies are pretty scant, and that's something that I noticed before, like, who is Davide Pagliarani? It's like when they give his biographical information, it's he was born this year, and then he entered seminary when he was 18 or 19 years old. And okay, did he have a family that he grew up in? What's his vocation story? Like they sort of whitewash that. They do give a little bit more background for these 4 bishops. It's like a 1-paragraph biography. The one who is American apparently grew up in St. Mary's, Kansas, was part of an SSPX family. But if you look at the biographies of all of them, it's safe to say that they grew up in the SSPX. And as my friend Pete Vere, who he's a canon lawyer who used to go to mass with the SSPX back in the 80s and maybe early 90s, he basically, and then when I brought his name up, I lost my train of thought. But he mentioned on a podcast that he was on recently that he's met people who are in the 4th generation of SSPX.
Really?
So it's a situation where, I mean, the society, I don't know when the society first came to North America, but it started in 1970, and then it was 1975 when it was dissolved by the local bishop, and that was confirmed by the Pope. So they've been operating illegally since 1975 or so. So that's 51 years. And in a lot of cases, it's parents who brought their children in, or young adults, and then now they're the grandparents, and in some cases the great grandparents, and their kids don't know what it's like to actually be part of the institutional church anymore. And if you look at
they've got to be real confused.
Well, I mean, and you look at Father Pagliarani. I mean, so I tried to do some investigation. He was born in 1970, I think, or 69 or 70, and then at 18 or 19 years old, in 1988. So yeah, I think he was born 69 or 70. Goes into seminary the year that the first illicit consecrations happened. Presumably, he was brought in as a child by his parents or a teenager, and it's not like he was a diocesan priest or was going to the local parish or was part of campus ministry as an undergrad or a high schooler. I mean, he's a lifer, and it's interesting to hear him condemn the mainstream Catholic Church and say that we don't have the ordinary means of grace, when what experience does he even have in the Catholic Church? So I think this separation has really been solidifying I mean, 1988 was 38 years ago. It's a
Yeah.
couple of generations. Young people grew up in that milieu and don't know any different. And I think at this
Well, I
point,
can tell you
yeah,
one, Michael Matt.
yeah. Well,
Michael Matt
yeah,
was actually baptized by,
he was
or
confirmed by
or
Lefebvre, I
confirmed.
think.
Yeah, confirmed. And what impact does that have for the Michael Matts, for the Kennedy Halls, for the rest
Yeah.
of these Catholic podcasters who are SSPX? What is I mean,
I think, well, to be a slight corrective, Michael Matt has said publicly, and I saw him say it recently, that he's not part of the SSPX. He supports them, he supports their views, but apparently he goes to a diocesan Latin Mass or FSSP or something. And I think he went to, before Summorum Pontificum, or whenever he didn't have access, he would go to the Eastern Rite. So his
okay,
family, and his big thing has always been unite the clans, and he's been, basically, he wants
right.
to bring the SSPX and the diocesan, basically any um, traditionalist who is not a sedevacantist. He wants to bring them all together and have them join forces to resist Rome. Um, but he has been running Remnant newspaper since, for his entire adult life, and
Yeah, his
presumably,
father started that.
yeah, there was a break off between his father and his uncle. One ran the Wanderer, and one ran and then one broke off and ran the Remnant in 1967. I think was the divide. So it was over Vatican II, and the Remnant was the one that was more in line with Lefebvre. Um, but yeah, so this is something that he was raised in, hearing these stories about the mainstream Catholic Church and how bad it is. And of course, in the era of the internet, you see, priests blowing bubbles on the, in the sanctuary, or you see pictures of something that looks like a clown mass, or, I mean, it's funny because I think, you know, you don't actually, most Catholics don't see anything like this in person, as you've mentioned many times, but they get it on camera and then they make it sound like everyone goes to a clown mass every week, and
That's
it's
right.
just, it's,
They exploit it, and
yeah,
they make it seem like everywhere, every Novus Ordo mass is some kind of clown mass. I actually did an in-depth video on this back last year, exposing what these, like Anthony Stein and Taylor Marshall and all of these guys, what they were doing to exploit these clown masses that may have happened one time in one parish, and now everybody thinks that's the way it is, and it is not. And I have
yeah.
said over and over and over till I'm blue in the face that I have never ever been to anything but a reverent, sacred Novus Ordo mass. That's it.
I mean, abuses do happen, and there was a silly season during the 1970s, and yes, there are priests, a lot of
Now
people in the,
I'm gonna
yeah,
defend the 1970s, Mike. I was in high school in the 70s when the Novus Ordo Mass was rolled out,
yeah,
and they make fun of the felt hangings in
banners,
the
yeah,
Mass and the guitar masses. Why was that so? Why did they pull out, or why did they do that? I'll tell you why. Because I went to a Catholic high school and they asked us to participate with our guitar masses. I played trumpet. I played at
yeah.
masses.
Well,
And they had the grade schoolers make the banners. It was to get them to
yeah.
participate.
Well, I guess basically my experience, obviously, you're my parents' generation. Um,
Oh, are
and
you
and the
saying
Pope's
I'm old
generation.
enough to be your mother, Mike?
You said it, not me, but my mother, who was born in 1951, so she's 4 years older
Oh,
than you.
okay.
So, but you know, she talked about, and my grandfather talked about all the time. So when in 1961 or 1962, they moved to the neighborhood where my mom grew up, from 11 until she was married, and the parish that they happened to move into the boundaries of was one of those parishes where the abuses did happen. Things like what the priest was always giving these, at least as far as my grandfather was concerned, heterodox homilies and things like that. They had liturgical dancing. They had like
We
homemade
didn't have
bread
that.
during mass. But this was apparently, it was a destination parish. So people suburban Maryland, people were driving from Virginia, were driving from DC, were driving from Baltimore to go to this parish, which actually it's funny because now it's a very conservative, the same parish, it's 4 miles away from me, and it would be considered very conservative now. But my grandfather, I think, was traumatized by the changes and by what was going on. And as you know, the anecdote I've shared before, he was so traditional. And this is part of the thing. There is a traditional sense of belonging to the church that it never occurred to him that instead of going to St. John the Baptist in Silver Spring, he could have gone to St. John the Evangelist in Silver Spring, or he could have gone to St. Bernadette's, or he could have gone to St. Andrew's, and he wouldn't have seen all of these abuses. So it's the local parish. Of course, I have to go to the local parish. Now, I think people today are a little bit more adaptive, and they realize, okay, I mean, granted, I think territorial parishes exist for a reason, and they serve a good purpose, and sometimes you don't have any choices. But there were people who truly were traumatized, and my grandfather, I think, was always bitter because of Vatican II, but I think it was because he did experience abuses, because the priests at his parish were dispensing with things that the church had not dispensed with, and introducing things that the church didn't allow. But yeah,
Okay,
and so
so
yeah,
let's go back to what is going to happen now that, and as I said in the beginning, the SSPX excommunicated themselves. This
yes,
was not done by Rome. They did it themselves because Rome told them not to consecrate the bishops. They went ahead and did it on July 1st, and it apparently stormed and rained on the event.
yes,
Now we don't know if that was rain, just rain, or whether it was God, but
yeah.
it
It certainly
rained.
put a damper on the event. Apparently, the
Yes.
estimates are 17,000 people were there. People from all over the world came to witness this. Um, it's interesting because I think the supporters of the SSPX were very much of the mentality of bring it on. We bring on the excommunication. Let's do it. Let's preserve tradition. That sort of shows how locked in they are into this mentality. But other traditionalists, like Joseph Shaw, I think, who's the head of Uno Voce, he's an Englishman, but we've butted heads before. Like he's a traditionalist. Like I don't think he'd be caught at a English speaking mass unless he was forced to. But then he might be one of those people who wouldn't do I don't know. He doesn't like the new mass, the revised mass at all. But he said this harms other traditionalists. Like you guys are doing everything that we've been accused of for however many years, of being disobedient, of being schismatic, won't even take part in the dialogue, basically announce what you're going to do, ask for permission, but in the process of asking for permission said, even if you say no, we're going to do what we want.
Yeah. Well, not
So
only
yeah,
that, and I can't say the man's name.
Palia Rani. And the reason why I know this is because there's an Archbishop Paglia. It's spelled like Paglia. The G
Oh,
though
yeah,
kind
that's
of
what I wanted to say was
so
Paglia. Okay.
Paglia
He
Rani is
even
the yeah.
he yeah, he even, um, uh, what do I wanna say? He even suggested that if Pope Leo would have met with him, it would have been a different situation, and it wouldn't have been a different situation
No.
at all. And so that right there, and I read this. Dan was on Tuesday night, and he read what the Pope said, and the Pope was pleading with the SSPX not to move forward with these consecrations of these bishops. He pleaded with them not to do that. I thought it was a very gracious letter. And then Pagliaroni,
Ronnie.
thank you,
Yeah.
came back with his response, and it was, it was, in my opinion, when I read it, it read arrogant to me, and they're just going to do what they want to do.
Well, and there was a passage in there that just reminded me of the sort of the petty debates that people have been having with the SSPX for forever long, where people will say this document says it's a schismatic act. You guys won't go to mass at the regular church. You tell your people not to go to mass at the regular Catholic mass. You won't, if you do go for a funeral, you don't participate, you don't receive communion. This sounds like a schism to me. And they would do this back and forth about, well, Cardinal Castrillon Hoyos back in 2002 said we aren't in schism, and Pope Francis told Pagliaroni that he's Catholic in a private meeting, and there were it's like and so Pagliaroni in his response put in one of those weird talking points where it's like, I thought we were supposed to be in schism in 1988,
Yeah.
but you said that we're going into schism, so that must mean that we weren't in schism in 1988, and that means we aren't going into schism now. And it's just like, is this a serious person?
I know.
He's on the
read
verge.
So arrogant to me.
He's being told he's committing a grave sin,
and he knows he is.
Oh, yeah. and he's resorting to this talking point that doesn't convince anybody except for SSPX people and people who are just confused. And so
so Mike, let me stop you right there. Okay. Yeah. So everyone, the timeline is Pope Leo put out his letter on June 30th, pleading that they do not consecrate these bishops. July 1st, the next day, they consecrated the bishops. And then today, Rome came down with a decree. Yeah. So let's go through the decree, Michael.
Sure.
And Mike did such a nice job outlining this on his website. And let me pull that up. I'll share it, the screen, and you guys can see it as Mike goes through it with us.
Yeah, I mean, all I did really was I translated it. It was posted only in Italian at 4 a.m. this morning, and I saw it at 5:30, and so ran it through Claude, and made sure it was accurate. And then I ran that through another one to make sure that it was an accurate translation. But just there might be an official English translation up, but there was a lot of times the DDF is very slow at getting that up. So
now, Mike, do you want me to read this, or can you see it to read it?
I can't. I can pull it up on my screen and read it here. And it's not long. The actual decree itself is not very long, so I can read it.
Okay, because I thought your explanation as well is really good. So if you'll go into that as well.
Yeah. So basically, the Dicastery of the Doctrine of the Faith, it came out and it says, despite the warnings addressed to the Superior General of the Priestly Society of St. Pius X, Bishop Alfonso de Galarreta, by carrying out an act of a schismatic nature through the episcopal consecration of 4 priests without a pontifical mandate and against the will of the Supreme Pontiff, has incurred ipso facto, which means by the act, the penalties provided for it in Canon 1387 and Canon 1364, Section 1 of the 2021 Code of Canon Law. So there was a revised section. It's the 1983 code, but the disciplinary section was updated in 2021. And so 1387, if you read the same decree from 1988 when John Paul did it, it refers to, I think, 1382. So it's the same canon, okay. The number just changed. One thing that I want to point out is, even though he mentions at the very beginning the Superior General, who is Father Pagliaroni, the first person listed is Bishop de Galarreta, who he's one of the 2 surviving bishops, and this mirrors the excommunication decree about Lefebvre. Basically, the bishop who did it is, person number 1 who gets excommunicated.
Okay, that helps, Mike. Thanks.
So then, he goes on to say, therefore, I declare with all juridical effects that the aforementioned Bishop Alfonso de Galarreta, together with, and then he names um, the four bishops, have incurred ipso facto the laetia sententiae excommunication reserved to the apostolic see. And so basically it's saying that these four bishops, along with him, have all incurred it automatically. Reserved to the apostolic see means that this excommunication can only be formally lifted by the Pope. Now, as you were saying
Ah,
before, we talk about an automatic excommunication. You can excommunicate yourself without having a decree, but this decree makes it official, makes it unquestionable. It's the official recognition of the church that this excommunication has happened. He goes on to say, I further declare that Bishop Bernard Fillet, who's the other bishop, or previously the other bishop of the SSPX, having participated directly in the liturgical celebration as co-consecrator and thereby having publicly adhered to the schismatic act, has incurred the late sententiae excommunication provided for in Canon 1364, Section 1 of canon law. And then the final part says, clerics and lay faithful are warned not to adhere to the schism of the priestly society of St. Pius X. Now, this is a very clear statement. It clears up any confusion. The SSPX can no longer use these debates that they used to use because the church was a little bit hesitant to outright say this is a schism. Now they're saying the schism of the priestly society of St. Pius X, lest they themselves incur ipso facto the penalty of late sententiae excommunication. And then it's signed by Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez, who's the prefect for the DDF. So he's in the same role that Ratzinger was in back in 1988. And then it's
okay.
also signed by the two secretaries of the DDF. And then
Okay.
along with
Okay.
that, I don't know if you wanted to talk about the decree itself or go into their explanatory note.
I would like for you to go into the explanatory
Okay.
note.
Yeah, that's not very long either. So it's got another protocol number, or is it the next protocol number? It's the same one. Looks like it's under the same one. And so he's explaining, why is this happening? What's the background? And he's saying, from the time of St. Paul VI until the most recent meetings held at this dicastery, the many attempts to restore to full communion with the Catholic Church those adhering to the movement begun by Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre have proved fruitless. I actually looked up the original Italian. I think the term might more literally be like have been done in vain, like it's in vain.
Mm,
Um, and this is true. We've negotiated with the SSPX for years and years and years. There were major standoffs with Paul VI in 1976, and then John Paul II in 1988, and then from 2007 until 2012, Pope Benedict worked hard to try to restore this group to full communion. And we can see by everything that the SSPX leaders have said in the months leading up to this, that they have not budged in their position 1 millimeter. Um,
yeah.
and so
And
he's,
meanwhile,
yeah,
how many popes have tried to work with them?
I mean, I guess we're on number 4 now, but I
Yeah,
guess three of
right.
them, yeah, I mean, John Paul I didn't because he was only Pope for a month, or that we know of. And then 3 popes had Paul VI, Benedict, and JP2 all did serious attempts to reconcile the SSPX. They relaxed Latin Mass permissions. They had, they worked out, you know, you don't have to give full adherence to Vatican II, but you need to be open to it. You don't need to celebrate the new Mass, but you need to at least accept that it's legitimate. And now they basically like they took whatever was offered to them, but they never gave anything back. They've never
Mhm.
conceded that they were wrong. They still call Lefebvre a saint. and say he's going to be canonized someday. I don't know what pope is going to canonize a guy who openly defied the Catholic Church and started a schism. I mean, it seems counterintuitive. Oh, I'm going to canonize this guy whose legacy is going against the pope. Like, what pope wants to do that? This is an invitation
Yeah,
to other people.
unless they canonizing themselves.
Yeah. So this situation has been further aggravated by the recent episcopal consecrations carried out without a pontifical mandate against the will of the Holy Father and an open violation of canon law. And, it just occurs to me now, but I don't have it in front of me, but I'll put it in an article summarizing this. But there's a part in every episcopal consecration, and usually, like, so if you get a new bishop in your diocese, the nuncio goes and a bunch of other bishops go. And one of the things that takes place is somebody says, to the nuncio or to the celebrating bishop, read the pontifical mandate. And it's a scroll. And so I'm in Washington, D.C., and I remember this part when Cardinal McElroy was made Archbishop of Washington. They read the scroll saying, it's from the Pope, legitimizing his appointment. And then he actually kind of walked down into the congregation holding up this scroll, saying that it was, that basically proving to everyone that he was legitimately appointed to be, on this job, to be installed in this job. And the SSPX came up with an alternative text. They don't have a mandate, so they wrote something else instead that, and I don't have the text in front of me, and it's not really worth looking up, but I mean, if you want to look it up, you can. But basically it says, because of the errors that were introduced into the church since Vatican II, we don't have an apostolic mandate, but necessity requires that we do this. So
Okay.
accordingly, this dicastery, in the faithful exercise of the responsibilities entrusted to it, considers it necessary to state that this act constitutes the canonical crime of schism. And one thing that these two documents are being a lot more precise and a lot more clear and a lot more blunt, frankly, than what happened in 1988. Rather than saying constitutes a schismatic act, they're actually saying this act constitutes the canonical crime of schism. So they are saying the SSPX is in schism, with the corresponding canonical consequences for the sacred ministers and the lay faithful involved. Now, this is where it gets kind of interesting, because the only people who were, even though the previous excommunication did say that anyone who formally adheres to the schism, the only people who were actually kind of considered or named as excommunicated were the 6 bishops that were involved. And this is a bit different. It's basically saying that, and it's going to go into this in the bullet points, but basically it's going to say that this excommunication and this schism is much more extensive.
Mike,
Yes.
Mike, can I bring this comment up and have you comment on it?
Sure.
And it says the SSPX supporters will cite how St. John Paul II, and by the way, thank you for the $20 tip there. As a cardinal ordained priest against the wishes of St. Paul VI in the USSR for a desperate need. George Weigel mentions it on page 233 in his biography.
I don't know that he did it against the wishes of Paul VI or against the explicit wishes of Paul VI. I think I don't, John Salza, I think, has studied it more closely, but my understanding is that he invoked the state of emergency, which is the same thing that the SSPX is invoking. But unlike Lefebvre, who was warned in advance, and Palirani, who was informed in advance, this is not a state of emergency. Don't go through with this. I don't believe that John Paul II was given any kind of warning like that. There's a better example. I don't know that when he did it, that the Vatican objected. I think he did it because there was a need for bishops. I'm not 100% sure. I know there's a more clear case. There was a Cardinal Slippy who was I think he was in Ukraine, and because of the political situation between the Vatican and the Soviet Union at the time, they weren't naming new bishops. And he was Cardinal Slippy, I think, was a I don't believe he was a Ukrainian Catholic. Maybe he was, but whatever it was Ukrainian Catholics were being persecuted. They were being driven out, and he decided to consecrate 3 Ukrainian Catholic priests as bishops behind the Iron Curtain, without a pontifical mandate. And it was a similar justification. But then the question is, okay, well, once that happens, what is the Vatican going to say? It's kind of a risk that you take. If in the case of Lefebvre, if it had been like, oh, I didn't realize you didn't want me to do this, or I didn't realize that this was going against your wishes, I'm really sorry, let me apologize. There wasn't it was done in defiance with the SSPX, whereas there are circumstances historically where the Pope has not done it. But and people bring up China. Well, there's sort of a tacit agreement between China and the Vatican, and this is prior to the 2018 agreement, where they'd basically get consecrated. A bishop would be consecrated in China, and then they would appeal to Rome to get regularized. So it was almost and it was granted in all but 7 cases and starting with John Paul II. So it was sort of this, okay, we've got this situation where we have an oppressive government, which was the case in Ukraine, which was the case in Poland, and which is the case in China. They don't have that problem in St. Mary's, Kansas. They've got their own bishop. They've got their own, they've got their own parishes. They've got FSSP. They don't have that problem in the middle of Switzerland. To say that it's a state of emergency, nobody is preventing the Catholic Church from operating in its usual way. Even in the case of Cardinal Slippy, where I do think there is a case that can be made that he really did act against the wishes of the Pope. Under normal circumstances, they wouldn't be in that situation. Basically, when the Soviets rolled into Ukraine, they drove out the Ukrainian Catholics or forced people to convert to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and so there were very few Eastern Catholics left in Ukraine. And the Ukrainian Catholic Church I believe, is our second biggest Eastern church. It has several million members, and so it's just a totally different situation. And it was not done because Cardinal Slippy thought that Rome had deviated from the truth of tradition. It's apples and oranges. And if Cardinal Slippy had really gotten under Rome's skin to the point, I think it was more of an irritation than anything. And Rome didn't really say anything, or basically wound up tolerating it. And one of those 3 bishops was eventually named a cardinal, another 15 or 20 years later. So,
okay, Mike, let's get back to the document. Okay. And let's go over the 2 points. Okay.
Yes. So he goes on to say, he quotes John Paul II. He says, from this point forward, sacred ministers belonging to the priestly society of St. Pius X are in schism and must therefore be regarded as schismatics. And so sacred ministers, talking about priests, deacons, and bishops, and are therefore subject to the excommunication prescribed by law. So and they refer to an explanatory note talking about how that is to be interpreted from back in 1996. Number 2, now this is the biggie. With regard to the lay faithful, those who formally adhere to the priestly society of St. Pius X under the conditions established in that 1996 explanatory note, which remains in force and which this dicastery hereby adopts as its own, are likewise to be regarded as schismatics and excommunicated. So so note, he's only mentioned the names of the bishops, but he has given a very clear statement that the clergy are excommunicated. With the laity, it's a little bit more complicated. And if you go to that 1996 explanatory note, which I just read today, basically it's anybody who says Not just people who incidentally, not just some old lady who likes the Latin Mass, or, you know, somebody who doesn't really know what's going on and doesn't, some people who go to the SSPX don't even realize that this stuff is going on. I mean, most do, but it's amazing what goes in one ear and out the other with people who go to Mass, you know, whether it's Latin
So
Mass or not.
I'm going to bring up a comment because John Lane is trolling the feed. Where's the Pope's signature on this document? A ridiculous statement, John.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, John,
so
that you keep going down this road, you will be banned from the channel. We do not disrespect the Pope, and you're trolling the feed, so you need to stop or you're going to be banned, okay? I want to make that clear. Go ahead, Mike. Answer that ridiculous statement.
With regard to, well, so
the Pope's signature on the doc.
The Roman Curia, the Roman Curia operates at the behest of the Pope, period. Now, people who are in SSPX and radical traditionalism, they use this kind of argument like, oh, well, the Pope didn't inform us specifica, blah, blah, blah. Well, the dicastery, the Roman office that's in charge of disciplining people and putting out decrees of excommunication, is the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. And that's, so it's the governance of the church. That's the way it happens. Okay, he's following the rule of law. The Pope doesn't have to personally sign every act of governance of the church. If Cardinal Fernandez went rogue,
he's not the president of the United States.
Yeah, if Cardinal Fernandez went rogue and put out a document in his name on behalf of the dicastery, and Pope Leo didn't approve of it, we will hear that. Okay. And when that happens, I will be the first person to say, oh, wow, Pope Leo didn't approve of this document. Okay. But until then, the presumption of a faithful Catholic who is thinking with the church, who is in line with the church, and given that this is consistent with what Pope Leo has said and with what the church has said, this is a formal act of the church. And I know the SSPX doesn't care about formal acts of the church. They don't care about church authority. They don't care about anything the church does that they don't like. Like,
well, it all boils back down. Yeah, it all boils back down, Mike, to obedience.
Oh yeah. And so the thing is,
it just all boils down to obedience.
They will take whatever little nitpicky, whatever they can take. Oh, he didn't say we were in schism. He said we were in a schismatic act. And by the way, Bishop Schneider said we're not in schism. That sums up the lack of intellectual honesty that is put forth by the SSPX. How is the church supposed to work? How is the church governed? I mean, one of the things that Lefebvre opposed with Vatican II, even though he totally misinterpreted it, which kind of makes me question how bright the guy was, to be honest, he opposed what Lumen Gentium said about collegiality, which said that the Pope acting alone or the Pope acting with the body of bishops, but not without the Pope, okay? So the Pope is still, he has to be involved in everything, and it doesn't take effect unless the Pope approves it. The SSPX
well, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. Okay. So I'm worried about these poor, the laity of the SSPX. I'm worried about them. They're the ones that are really going to suffer from all of this, right?
Yeah.
So the Fernando, is that his name? I'm sorry, you all. That's why I have Mike on here.
Yeah, I hope you don't mind me just jumping in and
just correct me all the time, Mike. Fernandez. So he laid that out about the laity if they move forward, right? So do you think that the SSPX bishops in the hierarchy are going to let them know this? What's going to happen to those that are innocent in this, Mike?
Well, you know, as I was saying, the SSPX is going to come out with spin. They're going to say, Pope Leo didn't sign this personally. They're going to say this, they ignored the fact that these are our 10 justifications for it. You know, they act like they're owed an appeal that they aren't really owed. I mean, in certain cases, there is no canonical trial necessary. And I don't have the canon law in front of me, but it would make a good article, because I've heard people say, they need their day in court. And really what they want to do, they've already said they wanted to do these consecrations, and they don't care what Rome says, and they consider them legitimate no matter what Rome says. It's very disingenuous to me, but they want some kind of canonical trial. Probably, these things happen in secrecy. Probably what they want to do is just sort of have a photo op and do press conferences and talk about how they were railroaded and how the decision was unjust. They know how this is going to go, but their position is 100% clear, and they had every opportunity to avoid what happened this morning. They were told, if you want to avoid this formal excommunication and declaration of schism, don't go through with it. It was that simple. And they said, no, we're going to go through with it. And so their leaders are all going to say that this was justified, and these are the reasons, and people are going to call you a schismatic, and they're going to call you a Protestant, but we need to stand strong. Okay, that's their opinion, but according to the Catholic Church, they are a non-Catholic group. They are outside.
Yeah. They're Protestants now.
Yeah. It's, Protestants with valid holy orders, but not. And let's go back to the explanation. Number 3, finally, the holy people of God are informed that the sacred ministers of the priestly society of St. Pius X administer the sacraments illicitly. And here they're talking about confirmation, Eucharist, anointing of the sick, ordination, holy orders, and that the sacrament of penance administered by them and the marriages at which they assist are invalid. And this is something that John Zalza has talked about at length. Yeah. But basically, these 2 sacraments, you need to have faculties from the church, from the local bishop, in order to validly administer them. Except for penance, any priest, even a laicized priest, even an SSPX priest, Old Catholic, whatever, can do it in the danger of death, licitly and validly. But that is the only case where they would have the faculties to do the sacrament of penance. And so all of those graces, they until Pope Francis gave them that opportunity in 2015, and he said he did it for the sake of the faithful. Yeah. Mainly because these faithful have been brainwashed by SSPX leadership to think that these sacraments are legitimate, but the church itself knew all along that these sacraments were invalid because they did not follow the correct, approval from the church. And they argued that it was supplied jurisdiction. Yes.
Okay. And this is another ridiculous statement that you hear all over the place, along with China. And that is excommunication for SSPX, but no excommunications for heretical German bishops. So this is an old, tired argument that SSPXers come up with. How do you want to handle that one?
It's apples and oranges. We are talking about
apples and oranges.
We're talking about an act that it says in canon law, if you do this, you will be excommunicated. They were told in advance, you're not in a state of emergency. If you do this, it will incur automatic excommunication. It will be considered an act of schism. The German bishops, for whatever they believe and whatever they do, if you look at people who are excommunicated for heresy, and in a lot of cases it's more like ecclesiastical discipline, like they're removed from office, or I don't know the last time we've had a bishop that has been actually excommunicated for outright heresy, like excommunicated. But priests have been excommunicated, and a lot of times it's for almost disciplinary stuff. Or if I remember Archbishop Emmanuel Malingo. Does that name ring a bell? He was an African bishop who became affiliated with the Mooney cult and got himself married in one of those stadium mass marriages, and then he started a group called married priests now. And then John Paul summoned him back to the Vatican, and he submitted for a little while, but then he left again and rejoined that group and got excommunicated again. Like, those are the sorts of things, like, it's a concrete act, something like getting married in a Mooney Stadium wedding. That's an event. So yes, some of these German bishops are probably heterodox and even heretical in their views. Okay, well, pinpoint one. Okay,
Yeah.
and then the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, a lot of times they will reach out to that person privately first, have a dialogue. Hey, you wrote this document and it doesn't seem to conform to what the Catholic Church teaches. And then they have a back and forth. They might suppress the book. They might they might take away the person's faculties to be a bishop. I mean, it's a much more complicated process. Now, I'll tell you this: if the German bishops started consecrating bishops without mandate from the Pope, they would be excommunicated too. So, I mean, that's kind of the thing. You look at it's just a totally different situation. Is this person openly and obstinately promulgating error? That's something that with the German bishops, I think that the issue is complicated. In a lot of cases, what they're doing is they are, German church is a weird situation because it's the richest church in the world, and it's the biggest because a proportion of tax money from German citizens who check their religion. They don't have the same freedom of religion that we do in the US. It's like you have state churches. If you're Catholic and you check that on your census box, then when you file your taxes, a percentage, I think 8% of your income goes to the German Catholic Church.
David
Okay.
L. Gray has talked about that
Yeah.
because, his wife is stationed in Germany and has been for the last 5 years. So he's talked a lot about that.
And so you're in this situation where you're a bishop in this church that is attached to the state, that's got all this money, and therefore is running schools that are not just for Catholics. It's running hospitals that are not just for Catholics. You've got all these lay employees, managers, doctors, consultants, whatever role there are in these different groups. And so you've got this bureaucracy in this rapidly developing or secularizing country, and then which means that church attendance is going down, which means that their viewpoints are becoming less traditional and more progressive, and the bishops themselves were always kind of seen as the bulwark. Like, so the laity in Germany is always the people with power in the church who are lay, and who knows how people say that a lot of them aren't even really practicing Catholics, but they are at least culturally Catholic, and they might be the president of a Catholic hospital, a lay person, and they'll have a voice in these conversations, and they'll say, we need women priests, we need gay marriage, and the bishops in Germany were always seen as sort of putting on the brakes, let's hold this back, And then what happened, and I think people kind of understood, because that's the way, okay, well, the church and whatever. Well, then in Germany.
Well, Mike,
yes.
Let's move on, because we're not talking about Germany.
Yeah. Let me just wrap it up. Basically, what's happened now is that in Germany, because of their abuse crisis, their bishops have no credibility in the public eye whatsoever. And so what they have been doing is they've been taking what these secularists have been proposing, and they say, well, we'll ask Rome, and if Rome says it's okay, then we're all for it. But really what that is it's passing the buck,
Yeah.
And maybe they aren't as strong as they need to be, but it's just such a different situation. It's not a bishop boldly going against the church. It's a bishop that's caught in a weird political situation, and he's trying to manage and maybe he is progressive, but until they start ordaining women, or until they start doing something completely in defiance of the church, they haven't done anything excommunicable. So anyway,
let's bring the audience back that have jumped on to what we're talking about. We're talking about the SSPX excommunicated themselves. Let's make that clear. Before there's comments about why did Pope Leo did this. Pope Leo did not do this. They did it to themselves because Pope Leo told them they could not consecrate bishops. And on July 1st, they consecrated bishops. So, in the broader scope of everything, Mike, in the SSPX world, in my view, this is done and over with. But is it?
Yeah, and this is sort of, I guess, what the second part of the show is, or sort of going forward. I think the SSPX, it's official. They are a non-Catholic group, people who are throwing their entire weight behind them. People, I mean, don't want to name names, but I'm going to. Someone like Kennedy Hall, someone like Jeff Kassman, laymen who have been apologists and who have been deeply involved in supporting the SSPX. Even though they are not named, they seem to be formally adhering to the schism. My understanding is that even though they will not be named by the Vatican in most cases, the local bishops have been given latitude. So if you're in St. Mary's, Kansas, the local bishop might decide that some of the local SSPX members who are lay, who are pretty prominent, might get the decree as well. Getting the decree is not the only, is not the only indicator that you are excommunicated. Just by the fact of supporting this and it formally adhering to their point of view, you are excommunicated. It's just a question of whether or not your bishop is going to be diligent or deem it necessary to do the excommunication, to formally do the decree. So
okay.
Yeah.
I want to pivot now to Cassandra's article.
Yes.
All right. Now, I told you all Tuesday night that there's some shocking news in the SSPX world. And I have been talking about this for over a year now, about how I've received letters from trad wives who are in abusive relationships, that their husbands are abusive physically towards them and rape them. And so many times, and you experience this on X too, Mike, so many times men have come out and dismiss this as happening. It is real. Is it not, Mike?
Well, and this, I think this just goes to show, and I think this is where what I was saying is where this needs to turn. I mean, the canonical ecclesiastical theological debate is effectively over, but the real problem is the fact, or the tendency of the SSPX. They're basically a high control group. They are, in a lot of ways, a cult. I mean, they're a group that, they're exclusivist. They won't, they set up little communities in particular geographic places. Their entire lives revolve around this group. Their entire religious vision is based on Archbishop Lefebvre's philosophies, and it's been carried through by his successors. But you also see a lot of things, and one of the things that this article that this woman sent and that we published a couple of days ago, Cassandra, she gave her perspective as a woman. Now, she's a single woman, so she wasn't involved in one of these marriages, but as a woman who was deeply involved in SSPX life for 7 years, the types of things that she heard and the types of things that she heard from priests and from other women, and what men were doing, as leaders of their families in the SSPX. And so it, there are things that the SSPX does. There are also instances of child sexual abuse, clerical abuse. There was a case where it was revealed that his name was, I don't remember. He was this priest. He was the superior in the US. He was the superior in Canada. I think from like 2000 until 2018, he was this like prominent priest in the SSPX, and his name is cited in some of my articles. But he turns out, so he wound up being convicted of child abuse in France. They say that he had over 30 victims. He's only convicted for one or two of them. And that he had written letters to his superiors in the SSPX telling them that he had these attractions to children and he didn't think he should be in these positions,
Oh,
going
wow.
back to like 2000. And I remember when people said, people saw the evidence and they're like, holy cow, what's this all about? And I remember in Crisis Magazine, Kennedy Hall wrote a, a defense of the SSPX's behavior about this guy. And basically what they did, and this is what he's defending, is that they took him out of any situation. Once they found out that he had abused somebody, these letters, I guess, got ignored or whatever, but they put him in a place where he would not be ministering to children anymore. Now, they didn't report this to the police. They didn't report this to the parents about why he was removed. They didn't report this to the community. They shuffled him and put him in a place where he was supposedly safe from abusing children, but they didn't warn the faithful that this predator was living there. And it looks like what the Catholic Church did, what the mainstream Catholic Church was doing
Yeah,
in the 70s and the 80s.
right.
And that one of the more prominent SPX defenders is basically laying out, oh, well, we did all these great things, and totally following this 1980s template of shuffling priests around and just trying to, avoid public scandal. It's just shocking, the lack of, comprehension of just how bad the fact that he doesn't realize how bad that looks. And when we published the article by Cassandra, we, first of all, in terms of going viral, it's our second biggest article of the year so far. People have been sharing it, people have been responding to it. I've gotten a lot of emails from people who are basically saying, this reflects my experience entirely. I had to flee my abusive husband, or my sister had her husband. She's talking about the way that women are treated in the SSPX. But when we posted it on Facebook and Twitter and people shared it, and received personal emails and messages of people saying, this is not, why do you believe her? Where's her proof? How does, one woman says this and this and this, but I've known these people and they're great. And, and it seems like, the reaction, once again, just like that reaction to the abuse, it's the reaction that Scientologists give when somebody says
Yes.
that something bad happened in Scientology, or the FLDS, or the group that the IBLP that the Duggars belong to. It's like, oh no, you're totally wrong. We're a totally faithful group. Once you've reached a point as a faith, like Catholics learned this lesson the hard way, and granted, learned it way too late. But beginning in 2002, we've at least, so almost 25 years, we have recognized that abuse does happen, that victims need to be listened to, and their experiences need to be heard. Yes, everybody deserves justice. Everyone deserves a fair trial. Everyone deserves a fair hearing. But just dismissing anything bad that's said about a group because you agree with them ideologically or religiously. We've just seen so many instances of this
Well,
hypocrisy.
it is hypocrisy. And Cassandra, everyone, her article is linked in the description area below this video. After the live stream, you could go read it if you choose to. It's very good. And by the way, I've reached out to Cassandra to come on the show. She's agreed to talk to me. So I'm hoping to get Cassandra on next week to talk about what she experienced in the SSPX world that she lived in. But not only that, I have a whole bunch of emails from trad wives over the last year and a half that have explained to me, I would never go public with it, but explained to me the abuse they suffer. We had Lisa Leopold from Bethany Consulting on the show too, talking about this very issue. So we know it's happening. We know it's happening.
Yeah.
So
And I wanted to bring up the other article, the one that we published just before. The title is July 1st, Pope Leo XIV faces the SSPX schism. Now the background of this article was this Spanish journalist or Argentine journalist working for a Spanish news outlet reached out to me because she was trying to get a hold of Gary Campbell, who's an Australian who has contributed to Where Peter Is for several years. And his background, he was a priest of the SSPX. And he wound up leaving because he realized that the teachings weren't consistent with the Catholic Church. And a lot of the things that he saw, he was uncomfortable with, and wound up going out the window at night in order to get away from this group. But she
Is
reached
this
out for
the
his contact
article?
information.
Is this the
Yes,
article?
yes. And so
Okay.
then
This
I referred
this
her,
is
I referred
called
her to Gary, and I referred her also to Lou Massett and Andrew Mione, who are two men who grew up, both went to the St. Mary's, Kansas boarding school, experienced the SSPX in their youths, and are now part of the mainstream church. And so she puts together this article that was published on Saturday, and I read it, with the online translator, and I'm like, this article needs to be shared, because she also incorporated a lot of Spanish stories as well, Spanish priests who had left, and Spanish people who were part of this community. But it was, on top of having those three voices that are familiar to our audience, or to my audience at least, also sharing these other experiences. And so I asked her for permission to translate it into English and publish it on Where Peter Is. And so now it's on Where Peter Is, with the permission of her publisher. And so I thought it was a very, very good, comprehensive, and very honest article about what was going on. And so, but
Let
one of
me
the,
ask you a
yeah,
question, Mike. Okay. There's a lot of comments because I put the title as the SPX, now called a cult. You actually referenced that it could be a cult. Why is that?
well, I mean, if you look at the way that cults are defined, um, it it checks a lot of the boxes. I mean, some of the people in trad recovery are probably better at, and I don't know if it was Dan Kavik actually who sort of went through. There's a famous cult expert, Stephen Hassan,
Oh,
who
yeah.
he was a Moonie back in the 70s, and he was deprogrammed. And it's kind of, I guess he was kind of kidnapped by his parents and some cult experts, and they deprogrammed him. He doesn't advise that anymore, but I mean, that's the way they used to do it in the 70s and 80s if your family member was in a cult.
Uh-huh.
But after he was deprogrammed, he sort of has spent the rest of his life trying to figure out. He grew up in a good family. He was well educated. He's Jewish. He was raised, some practicing Jewish. And he still does. He goes to synagogue and that sort of thing. But he's like, what happened to me? Like, how did I get pulled into this group where he was a recruiter and a major spokesperson for the Moonies for 3 years? And so he built up a model of basically, did they control people's access to information? Are they focused on, how do they treat people who don't conform? How do they treat people who have left? How do they treat people, within the group? How do they impose discipline? Do they have a central leader? And I think one thing that's a little bit different with the SSPX,
Isolation.
isolation from other
Isolation.
groups. They don't want you going to Novus Ordo because the Novus Ordo might corrupt you. Well, if it's a Catholic Church that's totally in communion with the Pope, and it's a mass that follows the rules of the church, why are they telling you it's going to corrupt you? Well, maybe you might hear something that will draw you away from the SSPX. I mean, they've demonized those of us in the mainstream church. And I'm not going to say that every aspect of the SSPX is cult-like, but if you look at a community that's that closed, like St. Mary's, it's hard to argue that it isn't. Now, I'm not going to say that everyone who goes to the SSPX is, sucked into the cult mentality, but there is a strong element of that. If you look at their message boards and so forth, it's always like, I'm having trouble with X, Y, and Z, and the responses are all, go to an SSPX priest, or, it's all like, let's keep everything in house. And then when you have this reluctance to be honest about abuses that have happened in the past and you're not willing to do that reckoning, and everything you do is focused on defending the institution or the group, it's hard to argue that it isn't. And that's one of the things
Well,
that yeah,
here's another idiotic comment. Catholic Church sounds like a cult under these conditions. You sound like a Protestant, and you probably are, so you're being banned.
I think, well, let me address that though, because it's one of those things. One of the things that the Catholic Church does have is we have a central leader, right? Um, but let's take a more frank look at the way the Catholic Church. First of all, look at church attendance. Okay, you know, some people say it's people decry it because in some countries, in the US it's like 25% go to mass weekly. Europe, it's some places it's 10% or 5%. Well, what does the church do to you if you don't go to mass? Nothing. You know.
Right.
There now, there are, people pick and choose. They follow the rules that they want to. The SSPX is always getting mad at the Pope for, hey, this he was nice to this person, but this person is, doesn't agree with the church on this and this and this. Well, they're thinking with the SSPX mindset, if this person isn't following all the rules, our impulse is to clobber that person. I mean, you hear about, I mean, it's astounding to me. And this, I don't think this is just the SSPX. Other traditionalist communities are affected by it. But like, in what universe does a woman go up to another woman in church and say that her skirt is too short? You know, and actually like and cause a scene in church, or tell someone that because they're wearing, their sleeves aren't long enough, that they shouldn't go receive communion, and that they're, creating an occasion of sin for the men in the group. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that happens at the SSPX, and people in the SSPX acknowledge it. And in a lot of cases, it's not to say you shouldn't dress respectfully for mass, but there are also, and if somebody showed up, I guess, in a bikini or something to mass, maybe, you know, you say something pastorally, but it's the fact that everyone in the congregation is giving the evil eye to someone, and then the fact that people are even willing to approach the person and tell them, that they don't belong. Like, if they're a visitor and their skirt is 2 inches above the knee rather than 2 inches below the knee, I mean, it's just bizarre that somebody would.
Well, what it is, Mike, is it's judging. Instead of
Well, yeah,
being there to worship Jesus, they're judging everyone around them. The
yeah.
ones
So
that, the ones that maybe don't have a veil on,
yeah,
or they don't like the veil they're using, or their skirt is too short, or whatever. All you're doing, and I used to be one of those persons.
yeah.
I used to be that person.
Well, and here's the thing that I'm going
And
to say:
I'm like, what am I doing?
the Catholic Church as a whole is not a cult, because you look at the
No.
enforcement. People have kids who leave the church all the time, and they don't. Shunning is not the main. There are certain behaviors that cults show. That is not to say, however, that there are not cults within the Catholic Church. And so that's one of the problems. You look at a lot of some of these charismatic groups that sprung up, in the 90s and 2000s. Mother of God community in Gaithersburg, Maryland, is near me, and that was in the 1990s. Cardinal Hickey had to intercede because that group was becoming cultish. You look at the Legionaries of Christ. You look at the Sodalitium Christianae that was in Peru, that was suppressed a couple of years ago. Like, these groups were formed around these charismatic leaders, and they did exert that type of social pressure. I mean, I think in the past, like, your experience sometimes working for Church Militant was almost like a cult experience because
Oh, it was
of
a
that,
cult experience. Yeah.
because of the charismatic leader who set their own rules, which weren't, the universal
And they
rules.
isolated us all. They
Isolate.
isolated us all.
Exactly.
And I want to say something real quick here, Mike. Chris Arman, I'm not even putting your comments on the screen, but I would never invite you to debate Mike at all, because first of all, I don't know you, and your comments are pretty absurd, if I may say. And not only that, but He did not say that it's okay to wear bikini in mass. He did not say that. That's an illogical conclusion you're making. And any more of this in my feed, you will be banned. Do you understand? You don't judge improper dress. You are not God, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, and he's
I'm
making
sorry,
a,
Mike.
yeah, it's a false dichotomy. I mean, it's one of the, if you're at a suburban parish and somebody shows up to the church in a bikini, they might be going through something, you know. I mean, I just want to say, it's like, or if somebody's dressed inappropriately, like either they are totally uninformed about how the Catholic Church works, because I don't think anybody wants to be isolated and, I- you know, but
No,
the thing
he's a
is,
troll. He's a
oh yeah,
troll,
yeah,
Mike.
yeah. I
He's a
mean,
troll. I don't have Dan
but he's
here to
also
control
irrational.
things.
I guess that's the thing I'm
Yes.
pointing out. He's treating it like it's this, that I've endorsed the worst possible thing, and when it's like you have to look at the situation. But anyway,
All right. Now let's get back to, we know there's abuses in the SSPX. We've got Cassandra coming on. She's going to tell her story on the show. You have, and I cannot say that woman's name that wrote the article. Gu, Ger,
Guillermina,
yeah.
or
Um,
yeah,
her
yeah,
article is also listed.
Guillermina, I think, or so it's Mina. Yeah, it's the, like,
Yeah.
Guillermo is William in Spanish, and then so she's Guillermina, which is, I guess, Williamina Lusdorf. So, but yeah, the article, the title is July 1st, Pope
And
Leo faces the
and that is
SSPX
also
schism.
linked in the
Um,
description
but
area below.
there's actually an anecdote in here. Yeah, and there actually is a section in here that I'll just, read it aloud in that article that
Okay.
pertains to Cassandra's article. And it's uh, from the interview with Lou Massett. And it says, Massett carries another extreme memory from within his own family. He recounts that in 1985, when he was 12, and he was the youngest of a big family, or one of the younger ones in a big family, his sister Lisa went to Bishop Williamson. So Bishop Richard Williamson was an English bishop, Holocaust denier, part of the SSPX, because her husband had begun to beat her. According to Massett, she had been raised to trust Williamson absolutely. The reply he attributes to the bishop. So so the journalist is using that, allegedly type of, language just to cover the bases. But this is what Lou says that Bishop Williamson told his sister. What are a few blows when the salvation of your husband and your son is at stake?
That blew my mind when you showed me that, Mike. Say
And
that again.
yeah,
This
and
is
I mean,
what,
that's the attitude. Bishop
say it
Williamson
again.
advised a woman who was being beaten by her husband, what are a few blows when the salvation of your husband and your son is at stake? And this is a man that basically formed the SSPX in the Americas for 20 years until he was kicked out of the society. I mean, he was the rector of the seminary in Winona, Minnesota, which was the U.S. seminary until they moved it to Virginia. He was also, a public anti-Semite, public Holocaust denier. He openly said awful things about the Pope and everything that happened after the Second Vatican Council. He was a conspiracy theorist, and he was kicked out of the society. And I think, once you're kicked out of the society, that because he wasn't obedient enough, ironically, you become a bad guy. But there are people who still admire him.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's not to say that Bishop Fillet and Archbishop Lefebvre were not extremists and conspiracy theorists and ideologues. And like I said, in one of the articles, Father Pagliarani regards Archbishop Lefebvre as a saint. And this is a man who called the Pope the Antichrist.
Okay, Mike.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this last question, and then we're going to go to break, and then we're going to take some questions. from
Sure.
the chat. Okay. My last question is, what should have I asked you that I didn't?
Um, I mean, I guess one thing that we might want to talk about is the and I threw this at you at the last minute right before is what's the process for reconciling people back
Yeah.
to the
Oh,
church?
good. That's a good thing to talk about.
And
Yes.
the Vatican just put that out a couple of hours ago, so it followed up
Okay.
on the decree. So that might be something worth discussing. And during the break, I'll I'll read the document pretty quickly. But yeah, I mean, there are so many
You
things
want
that
to
can be
go to
said.
break
Yeah,
and you want to
let's go to
pull it
break.
up? Okay, let's do that. We'll go to break. We'll be back and we'll talk about the Reconciliation Act, everyone. Okay? All right, everyone. Thank you for staying with us through the break. I want to thank all of the members only that help support this channel. I really appreciate you as well. I appreciate the tip that I got earlier for the channel from I'm sorry, is it Canticum Novum 1991?
Canticum
Thank you very much. I
Nova.
appreciate that.
New song.
And let's, Mike, did you have time to read the article?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, or just
Okay.
to refresh on what it said. And um, basically, the it's pretty straightforward. If a priest wants to reconcile as a priest, um, the gist is that they need to find an ordinary, so a diocesan bishop or a religious superior. So, like if you found a Franciscan order or something you wanted to join of pontifical right, basically you would go to you need to find one first that would be willing to receive you ad experimentum, which means on an experimental basis or temporarily. And then it goes through a list of requirements that they need to do. They need to write a letter to the Pope by hand, asking for the remission of the excommunication, and to basically ask for relief from the censures. And then they make a profession of faith. Obviously they have to be sponsored by this bishop or ordinary. And they need to submit to Lumen Gentium 25, which we've discussed this before. It is, if the Pope teaches on faith and morals, even if they don't teach it infallibly or as divine law, we still need to grant it religious submission of intellect and will. And this is the key teaching that is at the heart of the disobedience of the SSPX. They will not submit to what the Pope teaches. So basically, the priest sends all of this to that bishop, and then the bishop sends it on, and will state, "I'm willing to take this person on," and so that's the process. For lay faithful, it's a lot less complicated. Um, Basically, one of the questions is is this person even excommunicated in the first place? Like, let's say they realize what happened 2 weeks from now and leave right away. Um, to what extent is the penalty on them? But even in that case, um, they have to present themselves just to their bishop. Let me see. Yeah, they're under the
Can they go to a Novus Ordo priest and talk to the priest and tell them that they were SSPX, now they want to come back into a full communion with the church? Can they do it through a priest, or do they have to go to the bishop?
Okay, so there's a distinction. It says that there are people who are considered imputable, which means they formally adhered to the schism. So they would have to go to the bishop.
Okay. Okay,
People
got
who
it.
are
Okay.
not considered imputable, um, and they might have been aware of the tensions, but they didn't want to break from the authority of the Pope. It says it will be sufficient for them to approach a priest in full communion with the decision not to attend the priestly fraternity of St. Pius X in the future. So that's
Okay, does that also mean they would have to confess that?
um, once again, it's a good thing to go to confession. So
Yeah.
it's like presenting yourself to the priest and saying, "I don't want to go to the SSPX anymore." Uh, that's a spiritual conversation. I would, maybe the priest or maybe they would like to just have their confession heard, and I think that would help tie up any spiritual loose ends, if that makes any
Loose
sense.
ends,
Like if they
right.
were partially responsible for it, and it's good to go to confession in general. It doesn't say that, and that's one of the things. It's like confession is an integral part of our faith, but because it happens behind a seal, it's not really a formal act, right? So I would
Yeah.
think there would need to be an external, hey, Father, I've been going to the SSPX. I realize now I shouldn't be going, and I want to come back into full communion, and maybe a confession takes place in there or not, in order to have a more formal excommunication lifted. Um, Going to the bishop or going to Rome, depending on your circumstances, is probably more involved. I would assume that in order to receive communion, because you've been complicit in schism, um, it's best that you refrain from the Eucharist until you have confessed the sin of schism, I would
Mhm.
think. But I don't know
That
that
makes sense.
I don't know that, and I'm not the canon lawyer, but I don't know that confession is part of that formal process, because it is, there's no piece of paper saying this person went to confession and confessed this sin. I mean, because it is,
Okay.
you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
But there
Yeah,
is a,
yeah, right, right.
there's, so,
So
yeah.
let's do this. We always do prayer before I take comments. So, Mike, would you lead us in prayer, and let's pray for the people involved in the SSPX, the lay people, that they come back into full communion
Yes.
of Rome.
All right. And I guess we'll just pray a Hail Mary in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. And may the church grow in unity. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen about that. Okay. Now, everyone, there's a lot of comments, so forgive me if I don't get to your comment, but we're not going to be able to get to all of them because Mike has been up very early this morning,
I did get
and
in
we're
a nap,
already.
but
You did get a nap?
yes, I did. I did.
Oh, good for you. Okay. Um, so Paul says, at least now it's clear, no more irregular status, whatever that means. What does that mean?
Well, yeah, and so the thing is, like I said before, in the past, the church avoided explicitly saying this is schism, this is a schismatic group, this group should be considered in schism. Instead, they used more conciliatory language, like canonically irregular, or irregular status. Um, I think anyone who analyzed the situation could see that it was a schism, but you couldn't find a situation where the church actually said it was one. Now the church says it is.
I said
So
it.
that
Okay.
so those defenses are basically wiped out. I mean, they might try them, and they're going to say it's illegitimate, but from the official perspective of the Catholic Church, the SSPX is in schism, and those who adhere to this group are in schism, and they're schismatics.
Okay. Thank you. All right, John Roscoe. Christine, wife and I waited all day for your show. You're the first non-blood family member we thought of. Well, thank you, John Roscoe, and your wife. Thank you for watching.
I waited all day for your
Um,
show too, so.
Mrs. Train, glad you made that clarification regarding the responsible party for the excommunications, SSPX and Company. Thank you, Mrs. Trains. I know you've made a lot of comments here. And she goes on to say, love your articles, Michael. But it's
Latte instead of latte. I'm an American.
hearing
I
a lot of
pronounced
people giving
Polyarani
word
right, though.
marks.
Haley
Hey,
arranged.
listen, Mrs. Train, you know, he doesn't butcher up the language like I do. I mean, I'm like the butcher of not only the English language, but Latin as well.
You know, you can tell when somebody reads a lot but doesn't actually hear the words. Like I used to say artisanal instead of artisanal and whores divorce.
Oh,
You know, so latte sentenciae, yes, instead of latte. Yeah, I guilty.
okay. Here's an important question. This is from Diane. Hi, Diane. Big question. My father at a funeral back in 2019 in the Latin form. I was there, but practiced the Novus Ordo was wasn't valid. My family is concerned.
Well,
And she goes on to say, my father died and had a Latin mass for his funeral. Sorry, I didn't word that right.
well, there isn't. I
Well,
mean,
it would
just yeah,
depend if it's SSPX or it was a traditional mass at a Novus Ordo parish.
yeah. If
Or am I wrong, Mike?
so, in the United States, I think the majority of Latin masses, if you are approved by the bishop. There are groups
Yeah.
like the SSPX who have broken with Rome, and then there's another group called Sedevacantists who don't even believe the Pope has been the Pope since 1958 or 1965 or something like that, and so they only celebrate the Latin Mass. I think in both cases the masses are valid, but they wouldn't be considered licit. But no, this is what we're talking about here is not the Latin Mass. We're talking about a specific group that's attached to the Latin Mass. And
Right.
presumably your father, you would have known if you were part of the SSPX, I think, or if he was part of the SSPX. A lot of people just like the Latin Mass, and there's nothing inherently wrong with it.
No.
And
I mean,
yeah,
we have a parish here in Indianapolis. It's a Novus Ordo parish, and it's 8:30 mass is a Latin mass, but the rest of them are the new mass.
yeah.
So,
So he probably, I mean, if
there's
I was just to guess, based on the information that you gave me, it was probably just an approved Latin mass, which is, you can even say the new mass in Latin, and or it could have been the old mass, but approved by the local bishop and approved by Rome. So I
oh,
wouldn't
she
worry
goes
about it.
on to say it was an SSPX
No.
church.
Well, so if it was an SSPX church, I mean, it was valid. Definitely was valid. The priest, it was real Eucharist. It was, a real Catholic priest. Um, it would not have been in a ordinary situation with Rome, but it really depends on your father's soul and his conscience and what his understanding of the church was. We talked about imputability, which is the guilt. Um, and one of the things, like, people honestly are confused by the situation, and especially because of the rhetoric that the SSPX puts out, saying that they're completely legitimate and they're the true church, and of course they're not in schism. A lot of faithful believe them, and so um, you know I certainly wouldn't despair over the soul of your father. I would pray for his soul. I mean, I've lost both of my parents and I pray for them. Um, but just like anybody else, and everybody's life is a mess. So please, yeah, don't despair over his soul, but continue to pray for him. Um, and in the end, hopefully, he hopefully he was a good man and followed his conscience and followed the Lord the best that he to his ability. I mean, that's really all I can say. You know,
Okay, here's another
yeah.
one. Markio says, let's help a fellow Catholic. My friend is convinced the SSPX is the real church. Is he excommunicated?
I think technically speaking, assuming he is aware that the official Catholic Church said, and I'm saying this clinically, I don't know what his mental state is. I don't know, you know, to what extent he can comprehend it or is guilty or whatever. But objectively speaking, um, if you're aware that the Catholic Church has declared that this group is in schism and that adhering to this group puts you into schism and you are adhering to this group, then just as a matter of fact, you are in schism. Are you 100% guilty for that? Well, that's, only God can judge. It's between you and God and your conscience and a lot of other factors. But I would say that if you think that the SSPX is the true Catholic Church, or that it is where the true Catholic faith is celebrated, I don't think there's any reasonable way from the perspective of the Catholic Church to say that that person is not in schism.
Okay, now Matthew, who is a members only, asks, would it be fair to say that the SSPX was an overreaction to the crisis that happened post Vatican II?
In some ways, yes. I think that a lot of people, like I said, my own grandfather was traumatized by Vatican II, but and I wonder, he wasn't a joiner, so there was no way. I mean, unless the SSPX had opened up next door, I don't think he ever would have, gone out of his way to join a separated group. But was it an overreaction? I mean, I think a lot of it had to do with Archbishop Lefebvre's own psychology, his own wants, his own needs. During Vatican II, he played a very active role, and he was very upset about some of the things that were being taught. They went against his instincts. They went against what he felt that the church should be. And I think for almost every Catholic, I mean, I know I personally went through a reckoning. I grew up in a more, not traditionalist, because, my parents actually skipped over that parish and went to the conservative Catholic Novus Ordo parish, the next parish over. So, but even there, we were kind of the outlier family. We were the one, we sat in the third row, 4 kids, which, in some parishes is huge. And, we were the family that received communion on the tongue. We were we were always, my grandparents actually wound up switching later on to our parish when they realized, oh wait, you can do that. And they were line switchers. So they'd switch to receive on the tongue from the like they always sat on the side where the priest goes. But if there was like a visiting priest, or the priest decided to start distributing communion on the other side, they'd switch lines, like that kind of thing. And one of the things that I kind of came to realize during Pope Francis's papacy is this stuff, it's like, what it comes down to is, do I believe the Catholic Church is true? Because the decisions that are made by by the people who govern the Catholic Church, are out of my control. They could decide to take away your Latin Mass, and for some, and that was a traumatic thing. Like, maybe it wasn't carried out the best way for most Catholics when they switched from Latin to the vernacular. I think for like 98% of Catholics, it was a good thing. So yeah.
Along that line, Leigh Robinson says, how do I explain to them that they are in schism when they won't accept it? They won't admit it. What should you do?
Well,
other than pray for them?
I started Where Peter Is in 2018. And one of the things that I have learned is that people are going to believe what they want to believe. And there is absolutely no argument that will convince most people. But that is not to say that what I have said has not had an impact. I have had people who have reached out to me, and they were like, this used to be my Twitter handle, and it was like Knights Templar 256 or something like that. And and it would have been somebody who was just, really savage and calling me modernist and heretic. And it's like, and at a certain point, something happened in their life, and things needed to make sense, and they started to think things through more logically. And either the things I said planted a seed, or they started reading where Peter is, and similar similar writers. They started listening. They decided, what he is with Francis is like, what, he is the Pope. Maybe I shouldn't look at every new document that comes down the pike and look to it for heresy. Maybe I should read him as if he is my shepherd, as if he is the Holy Father, and I am a member of the faithful who he's supposed to be instructing. Like, it's all based on a warped. Paul VI called it a warped ecclesiology. Like, they see themselves as the judge of what comes out of the church, and that's
Well,
private interpretation. Yeah,
they also see themselves as the center of the Catholic Church.
yeah.
And
And
Lay
so,
Robinson, let me
I think
give
it's
you
Leah.
some. Is it what, Leah?
Leah, I think.
Leah
Leah.
Robinson.
I thought I saw.
Yeah. Let me give you some hope here. Okay. Um, pray for whoever it is that you're concerned about. All right. And this goes for all of us. Pray for the people that you're concerned about. Because really, there isn't anything that we can say or do to change their hearts or minds. Only God can do that. And obviously, Jesus, the Blessed Mother. But when they start searching, and there will come a time that they start searching, because God's going to keep pinging them to search. When they do, and they come to you for questions, be gentle in answering, and tell them, obviously, that you're praying for them, and encourage them to keep searching. Okay. Invite them to a Novus Ordo Mass if they're beginning to search. Invite them to a Novus Ordo Mass to go with you. If you're not in an area, or if you're not in the same proximity, encourage them to go to a Novus Ordo Mass and see for themselves. So that's really all that we can do. Mike, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's, I guess my approach is a little bit different, just because I've, been engaged in social media, and I've just, it's, what she's talking about is a very clear pattern that certain people,
Mm-hmm.
it's a rabbit hole that they've fallen down. It's a mentality. Some people never escape it. Some people do come out of it eventually. Um, but I think it's only by grace that people can be lifted out of it, and sometimes it takes a certain amount of maturity. So I would just advise, try to maintain the relationship the best you can, if you can. If you can create a stable relationship where you aren't constantly butting your heads over the same thing, um, then at least you'll be a safe person for them if they do, if they do start to witness changes. I guess that's part of it. It's one of those, always evangelize, but when necessary, use words. That's a quote that's attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, but he almost definitely didn't say it, but it's still good advice. Uh, I mean, words are necessary, and obviously you understand the issue, but if somebody is really committed to believing something, and they have a whole group of people behind them who are pushing the exact same set of beliefs, uh, it's not something that one can. Usually, they will lose patience before. I'm tempted all the time. Let's start at the beginning. This is your belief, okay? Well, what about, and then working through all the details about how, and they lose patience, and usually their temper, before you actually walk them through the whole thing. And so, I mean,
Yeah.
there are a lot of good resources there. Someone like Pedro Gabriel has limitless patience for And so he's written a lot of good articles and made some good videos that actually do go through that step by step.
I love Pedro
Yeah.
Gabriel, you all. He has a YouTube channel. He's been on the show. He's really, really good. Drew Black made a point to Leah, do as many holy hours as you can for them. Also, I would also suggest adoration. I think miracles happen in adoration when you go to adoration and pray. I'm a big believer of that, totally. But here's one thing I want to tell you all, and that's this. This is something I tell my clients in my business. Be careful. Be careful who you listen to. Be careful who is putting information in your mind, who is in your ears. Be careful. You have to guard yourself from lots of people, unfortunately. And so you have to really, really guard what you put into your mind. And I have said this, Mike, another broadcast. Every night when I go to bed, I pray that I ask God, because of my near-death experience, I ask him to surround me in that white light that I was in when I met him in my near-death experience. I ask him to protect my mind, my thoughts, my brain, my soul, my spirit, my pets, my home. And I do that every night before I go to sleep. That's one of my prayers, because of the nature of my business and what I do on an eternal life plan, and what you do too, Mike. You're bombarded with all of this negativity all the time. You've got to guard against it.
Yeah. And I mean, so yeah, I have a Carmelite spiritual director, and and obviously one of my prayers, one of the things, because occasionally people have said things to me that have just taken my breath away, that about how
Oh, they're
cruel or
horrible,
just,
some of the things
oh
that they've
yeah.
said to you.
And it's kind of funny because sometimes somebody will say something and it'll just call me some evil modernist heretic or something, and I'll show somebody the comment because I'm looking at something else, and they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, someone said that about you," and I'm like, "Oh, that's nothing. Oh, yeah, no, that's nothing compared to," you know. It's
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of funny because it's like, well, just like one, I was talk about your old boss, Michael Voris. I was once the subject of the Vortex. Like, there, pick my picture, and it said like liar and misinformed underneath because of something I
Oh
had
my
written.
gosh.
But the funny thing is, and that's not to say he didn't attack some people in very cruel and serious ways, but he he, he didn't make personal attacks like on my family or on my personal life or acute. He was just like, he called me a liar and he said I was misinformed. And like, to me, I was like, that I appreciate it, it's, whereas other people are
Right.
calling me, evil, and saying that I'm accusing me of all kinds of scandal and sin and being Satan's minion. And it's,
Well,
so I
they
think,
do you like they do me, and
yeah,
that is they attack the way you look.
well, yeah.
'Cause I
So
get that too, and it's like, that's all you got?
yeah, I mean, it doesn't speak very well for people who call themselves traditional Catholics. I
Right.
mean, honestly, like, are you really standing for the faith? But they don't really see the faith as, I mean, they must see the faith as a, like, rooting for a sports team. If you're a Red Sox fan, you want your team to win, and you're just going to
Yeah.
jeer at the other teams, when that's just that's not how Christianity works. If you are a true Christian, you're not going to call the Pope the Antichrist. I mean, you're not going to say that the average parish is sending people to hell. You're going to actually use, uh, you're going to look for, first of all, you're going to look for the positive to people and in people, and you're going to try to understand where they're coming from, and you're going to pray for them, and you're going to want to accompany them rather than set up anonymous accounts on social media and insult the way people look and, accuse them of sins of impurity. I don't, people you don't even know. Anyway, so yeah.
Well, Mike, we could be here another hour.
Yeah.
We're going to wrap it up, everyone. Thank you. I'm sorry I couldn't get to the majority of the comments. I do appreciate you for being here with us tonight. Mike, I always appreciate you coming on. And
thanks for having me.
Oh, and you all, I put the articles underneath the in the description area. So support Mike by he has a donation box on his website. They don't, you all, they live on donations.
Yeah,
so
we need to
you
get
just
better at
need to
asking
know
for
that. I know you never asked for it, but they live by donations, and I really respect that about you, Mike. So everyone, we will have Cassandra on hopefully next week. Mike will be back on in August. We'll talk about maybe something uplifting.
Yeah. We'll see. Hopefully there isn't like a celebrity exorcist conference or something.
Oh, geez. So you all remember, eternal life is forever. Got a plan? Your plan has to be Jesus. Thank you all for watching. God bless you. Bye-bye.